the issues that affect working people, and we come together to decide as a movement which candidates we are going to endorse. And it's in that context that we have this Attorney General debate. The news I was going to share was that today's debate was supposed to include 3 of the Democratic candidates, but one of our candidates, Rochelle Garza, is unable to participate. Unfortunately, Rochelle had a medical emergency that has required her to be in the hospital. We think she's going to be fine, but she certainly can't join us today, and we deeply regret that. And we will miss having her voice in this event with us. I think I can speak for all of our fellow panelists. I feel like I can speak for all of our delegates when we say that we're thinking about you, Rochelle, and we certainly wish you a speedy and full recovery. Now, while the statewide ballot in Texas will include several important contexts, we decided to highlight this Attorney General's debate for 3 reasons. Ken Paxton, Ken Paxton, and Ken Paxton. Put simply, the man holding this office is not fit to serve in that office and doesn't belong there. He's under indictment for security fraud. He's been able to use his personal connections to delay his trial for over 6 years. And he's under investigation as a defendant in a lawsuit around whistleblowing for people who were charging him with abusing of his office. In addition, besides giving a speech at the January 6th insurrection, he had the gall to file a lawsuit seeking to overturn the will of the voters in the recent election. And he did this all in our name, representing the state of Texas. But on labor, Paxton's record is even more atrocious. He's invariably voted against workers' interests when he was in the legislature, and he's ruled against workers' interests while being the Attorney General. So I think Texans are ready for an Attorney General who restores the role of the people's lawyers. And when our members knock on thousands of doors this year and make hundreds of thousands of contacts and phone calls, one of our top goals will be to change the occupant of the Attorney General's office. Today, we're featuring 2 candidates in the Democratic primary who are on a mission to unseat Paxton and administer justice in our state. Many of you will be meeting these candidates for the first time, and we believe the next hour or so will help you along in the path of making a decision about whom to support. A couple more preliminaries, and then we'll get right to it. First, I'm really honored to introduce our co-moderators for this debate, who have agreed to take time out of their busy schedules to ask questions today. They have really elevated, many of you who will recall, at our last convention, we've had a debate in the U.S. Senate race. And I think you'll notice that the quality of the quality of the questioning is much improved as we've turned to trained professionals to help us. Gromer Jeffers is the political writer for the Dallas Morning News. We have benefited from Gromer's superb, solid reporting and excellent insights into Texas politics over the years. His work has shown that he understands the deep connection between the direction of politics in our state and the fate of working families. We're also joined by, thank you for joining us, Gromer. And we're also joined by Jessica Montoya Coggins, who's the features and opinions editor for the Texas Signal, as well as the host of the podcast Tex Mix and a co-host of Signalcast. Jessica's reporting has included powerful coverage of issues that are important to working people. We really appreciate both of you joining us and look forward to your participation in this debate. Now, for the participants in the debate, Joe Jaworski is a 3rd-generation trial attorney. He's the owner of the Jaworski Law Firm and former mayor of Galveston, Texas. As mayor, he oversaw the rebuilding of housing that was destroyed in the devastation of the Hurricane Ike in 2008, a decision that truly helped working families. The grandson helped working families in the long term while perhaps costing him politically. The grandson of the famed Watergate prosecutor Leon Jaworski, Jaworski and his wife Rebecca have 2 children and live in Galveston, Texas. Welcome, Mr. Jaworski.
Thank you, Rick.
Lee Merritt is our other guest, who describes himself as an American constitutional attorney, who is a national leader on matters of civil liberties and government accountability. With a focus on cases that side with working people, Merritt often appears before the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, the nation's most conservative federal appeals court. Merritt resides in North Texas, where he lovingly co-parents 5 beautiful children and the family dog, Douglas. Greetings, Lee, and greetings to Douglas if he's watching. So thank you for being here. All right, quick summary of the rules of the debate. We've drawn the order for speaking, and each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening statement and 2 minutes for a closing statement. During the question and answer portion of the debate, the candidate who has asked a question will have 90 seconds to answer. And if a question is asked to all the candidates, the candidate asked the question will have 90 seconds, followed by 30 seconds for the other candidate to respond. Candidates can address one another during the question and answer period, but if a candidate does address or reference another candidate, that candidate will also receive 30 seconds to respond. Candidates will receive time alerts and be subject to the iron hand of the moderator if they transgress. Some of the questions that we'll ask reflect suggestions we solicited from union members across the state for this debate, and we have requested of our co-moderators that they focus on issues that affect working families, but they will ask questions that they deem appropriate as independent journalists. So, everybody ready? Thank you for joining us. And our first, we'll open with a 2-minute opening statement from Joe Jaworski. Mr. Jaworski?
Rick, I remember when Texas government meant good government, reliable state services, and productive partnerships with local authorities. I'm a native Texan who remembers Texas leaders who served with distinction and made you proud. Governor Ann Richards, Congresswoman Barbara Jordan, Lieutenant Governor Bill Hobby, Attorney General John Hill. These were giants of public service. Their work, their example, made us proud to be Texans. I remember. But today, Texas is led by corrupt officials who can't see past their primary races. Job security and self-enrichment are their daily purpose, not public service. It's embarrassing to endure their daily selfish contempt for the voters. They're embarrassing Texas on the world's stage. How far we've fallen from that time not so long ago when our government enforced safety in the workplace, stood up to powerful corporations, and served working Texans. You can't trust the Texas GOP to lead our state any longer. And Texans deserve a Democrat in high office to balance the equation and serve the people again. I'm running for Attorney General because I can win the race against Ken Paxton, the GOP's likely nominee. I'm a third-generation Texas trial lawyer whose family legacy is no man is above the law. I bring 3 decades professional experience to this race. I've practiced in courts all over Texas, and I have a solid reputation as an attorney and a former mayor that voters will prefer over corrupt Ken Paxton. This is the state's marquee race because we can win this contest in November. I'm Joe Jaworski. I'm running to serve as your next Texas Attorney General, and I respectfully ask for your endorsement and your vote.
Thank you, Mr. Jaworski. And now, Lee Merritt, you have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you, Rick. First, I want to thank the AFL-CIO for hosting this forum where I can share the virtual stage with my friend Joe. I regret that our colleague, Rochelle Garza, was unable to join us, and I'm sincerely praying for her and her family. We look forward to seeing her back on the campaign trail. I want to take a moment to honor the life of David Friedland, who passed away yesterday. He was a longtime union organizer for medical workers and the father to a valuable member of our campaign team, Laura Friedland. Laura, our thoughts and prayers are with you and your family today. Although my family roots can be tracked back to San Angelo, Texas, back when the region represented the state's westernmost border, guarded by the Buffalo Soldiers, I'm a born-again Texan, purchasing my first home in McKinney, where I raised my 4 children and our family dog, Douglas. I'm a former school teacher and a member of the American Federation of Teachers. I joined the Dallas Independent School District as a recruiter, which allowed me to crisscross this great state in hopes of drawing the nation's best and brightest into the classroom to help build the future. After graduating Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia, then Temple Law School, I became a member of the plaintiff bar, practicing in the area of civil litigation and workers' compensation. But it was in the federal courts where I found my passion for fighting to enforce the laws my heroes had fought to secure. I'm a proud member of the 4 million Texans that arrived to this great state in the last 10 years. I launched my national civil rights practice in Dallas, Texas, in order to confront the attack on civil liberties by Texas state actors using the protections offered by federal law. My practice has gained international notoriety for combating governmental abuse and advocating for community empowerment. I'm a fighter that has repeatedly stood up to the Republican bullies and won. Considering this historic attack on people's rights by Texas Republicans, I am prepared for such a time as this to continue the fight as your next Texas Attorney General. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Merritt. Appreciate both of you right on time. So that's great. It's a good sign for the rest of the debate. All right. So I said that I get to ask the first question. So I'm going to ask the first question, then I'm going to kind of be quiet. So here's my question that I'm going to direct first to you, Mr. Merritt, and then to both of you to answer this question. If you're elected Attorney General, how will you use your platform and your
like I said,
excuse me. How would you use your platform and your position to ensure that working people in Texas needs are reflected and that they have the protections that they deserve?
Thank you for that question, Rick. Partnering with the unions is going to be paramount to the Texas Attorney General's office. As we've seen for at least the past 2 terms, if not the last 3, attorney generals, having an attorney general who is sided with corporations and hostile to worker unions is bad for the workers in Texas. I will make it a point to ensure that I keep an open line of communication with the labor community. As a member of the labor community, I will fight for a living wage for Texas workers, for strong and robust unions and union membership. Right now, the AG's office has gone out of its way to make it more difficult for workers to join unions. For example, making it difficult for workers to automatically pay their union fees in requiring pre-clearance. I would side on behalf of Texas workers and worker unions to grow robust unions to continue to fight on behalf of Texans.
Thank you, Mr. Merritt. Mr. Jaworski.
Rick, it's important to remember that the Texas Attorney General is not the governor's lawyer. He's not the legislature's lawyer. He's the people's attorney. And so I will take the duties of office very seriously in that philosophy. Specifically, instead of waging a never-ending culture war like the incumbent is, I would return it to consumer protection. And that is the core obligation of the Texas Attorney General. So when it comes to healthcare insurance and property insurance, the working people will know that the people's attorney is on their side. When it comes to utilities and price gouging, like we've seen after Winter Storm Uri, the working people will know the people's attorney is on their side. That's my philosophy.
Thank you very much for both of y'all for that answer. I'd like to turn it over to Jessica Montoya Coggins for her first question. Welcome again, Jessica, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to everyone who, I know we all wanted to be here in person, but thanks to everyone who very seamlessly turned this into a virtual event. So this is a question for both candidates, and we'll go Joe and Lee first. Could you please talk about your legal background, and specifically, what are some relevant things that you have done in Texas?
Thank you, Jessica. I received my law license from the Texas Supreme Court in 1991 after graduating University of Texas School of Law. I clerked for the United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit as a briefing clerk to Honorable John R. Brown, the former chief judge. This was an incredibly eye-opening experience. He was a civil rights icon, and I learned how to write. Then I worked in an admiralty defense practice representing oil and gas interests and drilling companies and maritime companies. I changed to the plaintiff's bar in 1998, and for the first 2 years, I made about $12,000 each year. It was rough, but I finally found my stride, and I became an attorney for families, men, women, and children who were injured, sometimes killed, and I got justice for them. When I was mayor of Galveston, I then segued into full-time mediation. I have now mediated literally thousands and thousands of claims to successful resolution. Right now, the biggest word I would say is 30 years of attorney practice in state and federal trial and appellate court. And perhaps the biggest case just to highlight today is when I sued the University of Texas, my alma mater, and each of their Rick Perry appointed regents when they fired 4,500 people at University of Texas Medical Branch following Hurricane Ike. I sued, I kept the case in Galveston, I brought them to the settlement table and made the powerful University of Texas regents rehire and create a program so that UTMB was saved.
Thank you again for the question, Jessica. The law was actually a second career for me. I started off in the classroom, and it was while advocating for student rights and and organizing the community as an educator that I wanted to figure out how to better advocate for the communities, particularly around laws concerning housing. So I attended Temple Law School in Philadelphia, and after obtaining my law degree, I joined the Cochran firm in hopes of using my training to best serve communities. After gaining some initial experience as a trial attorney representing before the plaintiff bar, representing personal injury claims, I decided that I want to more narrowly focus my practice on advocating on behalf of individual citizen rights. And I thought about where in the country the need for a constitutional and civil rights lawyer was most pertinent. And I decided it was in the Fifth Circuit that produces some of the more conservative opinions throughout the country. And so I moved my practice to Dallas, Texas, and I began exclusively advocating on behalf of individuals who had their civil liberties trampled upon or their rights violated by members of their own government. I went on to represent the first family in the history, in the last 50 years of in Dallas County who had an officer held accountable for the murder of a 15-year-old named Jordan Edwards. I went on to represent the family of Tatiana Jefferson in Tarrant County, Botham Jean in Dallas County, veteran Damian Daniels in Bexar County. I've represented dozens of families all throughout the state of Texas, gaining a national reputation for securing rare accountability for officers where they've typically eluded liability.
Thank you. Gromer?
Thank you. I want to echo Jessica. It's great being here, and thank you to everyone who put this together. I think it's important that we be able to hear from our candidates, and congrats to both candidates for being willing to come here and share your ideas. And I just want to say quickly to Rick, I will send him this.
Oh, no. I can't believe you went there.
But, Mr. Merritt, this question is to you. It's likely that Ken Paxton will be the Republican nominee for Attorney General. But even if he isn't, how will you amplify your campaign for that position, given the fact that you may not have the same resources or money that the incumbent or the Republican candidate will have?
And is that to Mr. Merritt or?
I'm sorry.
Opportunity.
Who was that for, Gromer?
Mr. Merritt.
Mr. Merritt. I think he might be frozen, so maybe why don't we go to...
Okay.
I think this is...
I'm
sorry. Was there an issue with my sound?
Yes.
Yeah, we couldn't hear you. Start over.
Did you hear the question, Mr. Merritt?
I did hear the question perfectly.
Great.
Okay. I think this candidacy, this race is an opportunity for us to change our tactic. We must begin to drive towards our base in Texas. We must turn out Black and brown voters. We must capitalize on the fastest growing bloc in the history. In the state of Texas right now. That's voters under the age of 30. Between last presidential election and the one prior, increased 400%. My candidacy provides a unique opportunity to bring national attention to the race of Texas Attorney General. I have the resources and the platform built up over years of advocacy with distinction all throughout Texas and all throughout the country. And so this is our opportunity to signal to some of the communities in our state who have often felt unrepresented by our slate of candidates, to show that we have a real commitment to progressive values, to show that we have the energy and dynamism to attract voters who have typically stayed home, particularly in off-year elections.
Mr. Jaworski, same question.
Yes, sir. Gromer, it is important that we have the resources to defeat Ken Paxton. As you know, he was at Mar-a-Lago just last month raising money with Donald Trump. And therein lies our opportunity, Gromer. First off, I'm a serious fundraiser. So far, I've already raised $1.3 million in this primary campaign, and we're not done yet. Number two, it's a national race in some respects against Ken Paxton, Donald Trump's new consigliere. Seriously, I've written a memo called The National Case to Defeat Ken Paxton. And while this is clearly a Texas race and the Texas Attorney General needs to be taking care of business here at home, we have an opportunity to raise money nationwide because, number one, Ken Paxton is Trump's counselor. And if you want to stop Trump in 24, you need to stop Ken Paxton in 22. But secondly, Gromer, he's a vexatious litigant, and he's hell-bent on destroying the Biden administration and democracy itself. Am I exaggerating? I don't think so. So I think that there will be willing contributors all across the nation. And as you know, there are no limits. So let's play under the rules that we all play under, and I'll take Mr. Paxton on. He can raise all the money he wants, but he can't hide the truth.
Okay. Regina? Jessica, I'm sorry.
People make that mistake all the time. So once again, for both candidates, and we'll go Joe and then Lee. So as you said, Ken Paxton is a vexatious litigant, and he has very much led the way in trying to dismantle DACA. How would you, as an attorney general, lead when it comes to this, especially if you are in the position with a divided state government?
Well, thank you, Jessica. And I'll remind that, even as a divided state government, I think it would be fascinating to be the only Democrat in a room of Republicans, because the Texas Attorney General is a statewide constitutional executive. And as we all know, when the Texas Constitution was written, they decided to sort of, atomize the executive function. So it is a weak governor, and the legislature is part-time. But the Texas Attorney General is 24/7. On the question of DACA, just like Senate Bill 8, just like some of these election laws that they've passed, the Texas Attorney General, as a Texas lawyer, has a duty under the Texas disciplinary rules of professional conduct to make his or her own examination. And if the position the client is asking you to advance is frivolous, then you have a duty of candor to the court to take a better approach. So on DACA, on abortion, on other matters, I will exercise my God-given judgment as educated in the state of Texas and as an attorney for the people to take my own position. So just because the governor and the legislature say it one way, Jessica, I have my own views. And especially since immigration is a federal matter, these questions where the governor gets to just insert his own opinion and spend billions of dollars down on the border of our money, he would have a different sheriff in town with me as Attorney General.
I should just start responding next.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I agree with Mr. Jaworski here. We must remove or withdraw from the right-wing led DACA. It is clearly that the Supreme Court on the side of the right in place. If we're going to continue to support of the entire community of Texas, the community, it's our responsibility to protect immigrants. Now, as Mr. Jaworski said, immigration is a federal issue that should be left up to the federal government. And it's too long, our government, the Texas state legislature down in Austin and the governor's office has made this an issue of us versus them. And we have a responsibility from the AG's perspective to stand on the side of our immigrant community and ensure a fair asylum seeking process, to ensure that our immigrant workers in particular have every opportunity to participate in the workforce and to exercise their rights under Texas law.
All right, let's stay with you, Mr. Merritt. Attorney General Paxton has made prosecuting voter fraud a top priority in his office. Would you make that a priority if you were elected Attorney General? would the prosecution of voter fraud also be a top priority in your office, or would that change?
Not priority in my office. On all the data has indicated to us that there is no such thing as substantial voter fraud that would impact Texas elections. Instead, the number one priority for my campaign, the number one priority for myself as Attorney General would be to protect Texas voters and to ensure that Texas no longer remains one of the most difficult states in the country to vote in. And so what that would mean from my Texas Attorney General's office is an office dedicated solely to protecting the integrity of voters, to ensuring some of what we're seeing happening right now with voters not getting access to mail-in ballots, would have attorneys from the AG's office prepared to respond to claims of voter suppression, to make sure that our senior citizens and those who qualify, and even expanding the qualification for those who would want access to mail-in ballots, to increase voter drop box locations, to ensure our Texans with disabilities their rights under the Americans with Disability Act to reasonable accommodations to ensure that participation in the legal process are guarded. That means bringing back 24-hour voting, fighting for drive-through voting, and importantly, ending the frivolous litigation against people like Crystal Mason and Hervis Rogers in Montgomery County, where the evidence has shown that Ken Paxton has maliciously targeted individuals and failed to allow them their chance to participate in the process.
Mr. Jaworski, same question.
Gromer, I will take the ashes of Ken Paxton's fake voter fraud unit, and I will turn it into General Jaworski's voter access unit. Because, Gromer, you ought to be able to call the government if someone is stepping on your voting rights. If you get in line at 6:45 p.m., but they shut the doors before letting you vote. If you sign your name, as you do, on your application to vote by mail, and you sign your name as you do on the ballot itself, but some busybody in the clerk's office says, well, these signatures don't match, you ought to be able to call the government. In fact, you ought to be able to call the government if your 18-year-old looks at you and says, Dad, I don't know what you're talking about. When you say, son, did the principal offer registration to the senior class twice this year? Because, you know, everyone, that's the law in the state of Texas. Election Code 13.046D requires every principal in every high school to offer every student who attains the age of 18 registration twice. Can you imagine if we register every 18-year-old and they make a habit of voting? And can you imagine what a different state we'd have, Gromer, if we inculcate the same zeal at age 18 in voting that they feel only 2 years earlier when it's time to get the driver's license? We'd be a different state.
For a quick follow-up, and just stay here with you, Mr. Jaworski, and then you, Mr. Merritt. So you both have said you would promote voting rights. How would you do that, and how do you do it when the legislature sort of is passing laws that, you know, at best don't call for the expansion of voting rights?
Well, Gromer, you're right. The Attorney General can't legislate, but there are two functions that the Attorney General has that the legislature doesn't. One is the power of court, the appearance in court. So in the two cases known as United States of America versus the state of Texas, I mean, think about that just for a minute. This Attorney General would reverse the pleadings on the question of illegal gerrymandering and Senate Bill 1, all the voting that we're trying to undo via John Lewis and the America Votes Act. So that's not going to happen, it appears, in Congress. So I will reverse Texas's position, and the Attorney General will be on the side of the voters. Secondly, Gromer, Attorney General opinion section. This is a vast, powerful department, and I'm looking forward to having my initials, JJ, and letting all the Attorney General opinions that flow therefrom. So that is something that we can do to elaborate on voting. And I'm serious. I will send a letter every August to every principal. There's like 1,600 principals in Texas. So we'll spend 1,600 stamps, and we'll send them a letter and say, this is your Attorney General. Please let us know the 2 days that you're going to offer registration, and we'll be there to celebrate.
Mr. Merritt.
I think it's important that the Texas Attorney General uses the opinion power to explain to the legislator and to the governor when he's promoting these voter suppression laws that the constitutional protections for every citizen in Texas simply doesn't allow a state to go rogue. That means that we cannot pass laws that counter the Americans with Disabilities Act, for an example. And so when I referred to that earlier, it's a strategy that we've learned as federal constitutional attorneys to oppose some of the voter suppression tactics used by Republicans in Texas and all throughout the country. It's also important that we use the bully pulpit, our presence in that office, to encourage DC to do the right thing. When Texas legislators, brave Democratic Texas legislators, fought to filibuster the passage of the illegal voter suppression laws pursued by the legislator, I joined them. I went over to DC, and just this past Monday on Martin Luther King Day, I met with Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, and we discussed ways that we could continue to fight for Texans to get much needed protections from DC, codifying things like automatic voter registration, fighting to pass the John Lewis John Lewis Voting Act and other voting protections at a federal level. So it has to be an inside-outside game. Fighting, using the power of opinion and our presence in the courtroom to challenge unlawful voter suppression tactics, and joining the national community and attorney generals across the country to fight for statewide voter protection rights.
You're muted, Romer.
I was saying, Jessica, go ahead.
Okay.
Great. So currently, Ken Paxton is fighting tooth and nail against getting his communications released in the lead up to January 6th. So on that note, starting with Lee Merritt, will you agree to comply with and enforce the Public Information Act as an Attorney General?
The failure for Ken Paxton to comply with the Open Information Act has been a source of frustration for me as an advocate for Texas families for many years. And it was one of the reasons I decided to run for the Texas Attorney General's office. Watching families being denied access that the law has already granted them access to is something that must stop. And I, of course, commit to the full transparency that the people of Texas deserve. I also commit to ensuring that the Texas Attorney General's office has integrity in place by having folks from the outside come and review our actions so that we're not simply investigating ourselves, but that allowing and opening our office up to an audit for integrity from outside agencies to ensure that the AG's office doesn't continue to police itself.
And same question, Joe.
You're muted.
You're muted.
You're muted, Joe.
Yeah, you got me. I pride myself on that never happening, but we're all human. Jessica, I do commit to that, of course, and there will be no question that I will be the most transparent Attorney General in my life. There will be experience that I can draw upon as well, because as a local government official in Galveston, Jessica, for a total of 8 years, city councilman, mayor pro tem, and mayor, we had annual Texas Public Information Act training. In fact, I've had so many open records requests asked of my emails and cell phones. I know how that works. And it's just good to not lie. It's good to be transparent. Big difference between me and Mr. Paxton.
All right. Jessica, Mr. Merritt, in Dallas County and places across the country where they have Democratic Party prosecutors, they've shifted from to more of a justice-seeking environment rather than traditional lock them up and throw away the key approaches. What would that look like under a Democratic Texas Attorney General in terms of putting resources and sort of ending the prosecutions that critics say lead to mass incarceration?
I'm so proud of the work that progressive prosecutors have done across the state of Texas. And in fact, in my position as co-founder of the Grassroots Law Project, I have helped elect progressive prosecutors throughout the state of Texas, participating in Dallas election of John Crusoe, who has gone out of his way to ensure that crimes of poverty are not treated as criminal offenses, but that individuals who are found in need get access to the resources that they would need to serve their families and their communities, ensuring that individuals in mental health crisis are not treated as criminals, but are rerouted or diverted to locations that provide them both the mental health services and the resources that they need to become full citizens. I've worked with the Bexar County prosecutor, the Travis County prosecutors, and I continue to be proud of the work that they do. But we see an Attorney General's office right now, and Ken Paxton, who has made them public enemy number one. He keeps calling them Soros-funded prosecutors. A claim alleging that because they were able to draw on the support, major support and resources from outside of the state, where their government has failed to support them, that they're somehow guilty of wrongdoing. The truth is that support should be coming from Austin. It should be coming from the Texas Attorney General's office and the $1.26 billion budget that we have to improve the lives of Texans. I will refocus the Texas Attorney General's office as a source of support for these progressive prosecutors and continue to ally myself with them to provide them the additional help and resources that they need to serve Texans.
Mr. Jaworski.
Gromer, as we know, the Texas Attorney General, as a constitutional officer, we look to the Constitution for his or her duties. Criminal prosecutions, as you know, are assigned to the various district attorneys and sometimes county attorneys. So here is a real opportunity for the Texas Attorney General to change course. As our cities grow, as they are routinely blue, we have progressive prosecutors and county attorneys. Like my home, Harris County, where I was born, we have a great DA, Kim Ogg, and we have great County Attorney Christian Menefee. They have innovative plans. As a former mayor, I take this very seriously. Local decision-making authority is key here. So the Texas Attorney General should be supporting cities and counties, and I'll throw in school boards, rather than fighting them for his colleague, Greg Abbott, in this case. They need to take their authoritarian thumb in Austin, in the governor's mansion, in the Attorney General's office, away from local decision-making authority. So as prosecutors in Dallas, Houston, El Paso, San Antonio, and the like come up with progressive policies, I will be there to support them because that is their province.
All right, again, questions for both candidates, and we'll start with Joe and then go to Lee. How will you establish the Attorney General as a people's lawyer that bolsters consumer defense and oversight of public offices, the governor, and the legislature?
Well, you know, a little known fact about me, Jessica, is I am a lifetime drummer. I've played in so many bands I can't count them, and I love drumming. And as a jazz drummer, there's this great old saying, less is more. You can imagine what that means. You know, lay down the beat, put a solid beat down. So I would say the same thing to Ken Paxton. Less is more. Instead of being this culture warrior who's dancing on a national stage where you file suit after suit and then pat yourself on the back every night on the Maria Bartiromo show, why don't you stay home and focus on the duties of the office? So the Texas Attorney General, being the people's lawyer, can make choices as policy matters. I think the first thing you do on day one, I mean, I've written a little menu of what I'm going to do on day one, Jessica, and one of them is identify any lingering litigation against the Affordable Care Act and dismiss it before the lunch hour. Turns out people like health insurance that covers not only what you're going to be sick with, but what you're sick with on the day you pay your first premium. So that's a choice. How about instead looking at private health insurers? I'm a big fan of private health insurance. I like to pay a premium and get my rights. But nobody can afford a lawyer or get a lawyer interested if claims are not paid reasonably or on time. What if the people's attorney simply made a choice upon achieving the office that there will be new leadership who will let the health insurance companies know claims will be paid on time and reasonably in Texas. Our civil investigative demand and litigation power says so. So it's simply a choice. It's simply a policy choice. Instead of being a culture warrior, be a consumer protector.
I see this as, again, a great opportunity for the Texas Attorney General's office to side with the people of Texas. Before I ever thought about running for the office of Texas Attorney General, I was featured in an article with the Texas under Texas Monthly that labeled me the people's attorney. The reason they labeled me that was because of my work with Texas organizations like AFL-CIO, like LULAC, like the Texas Organizing Project, and the organizing community throughout the state of Texas, advocating on behalf of Texans. And so I think this question in a bit answers your question, Jessica, but also goes back to what Romer said. We need to partner with our local prosecutors and to ensuring that the Texas Attorney General Office offers them the resources that they need, in addition to helping elect progressive prosecutors. And I really want to emphasize, I'm not talking theoretically about what we might do to make this a people's lawyer's office. I'm telling you what I'm currently doing and how I'll expand what I'm doing in the AG's office. But instead, we also need to be having commissions, listening to the communities, listening to the workers, discussing with them how they could be best served by the Texas Attorney General's office. That's something that Keith Ellison is doing in Minnesota. It's something that we've seen progressive AGs do all over the country, not simply sitting on the sidelines and responding to litigation as it arises, but using that office as a progressive tool to empower communities, to respond to community demands, to listen to the citizens and react.
Okay, this question is to both of you, and let's start with you, Mr. Mayor. It's from a voter. So no one is above the law. It's heard daily on social media and in the news. And I dare say that most Texans believe in this saying. So how do I, as a voter, know that you, as the Attorney General of Texas, have the inner moral courage and conviction to follow the law and prosecute anyone who breaks the law?
This conviction has lied at the root of my practice as a civil rights attorney throughout the state of Texas since I first got here. No one is above the law, and even powerful, insulated state actors who violate citizens' rights must be held accountable. Obviously, the current Attorney General has run afoul of that. He's been criminally indicted in my home county, in Collin County, for the last 5 years. And in my efforts to protect citizens' rights, in my efforts to advocate on behalf of Texas families, I gained the enmity of the Republican Party, and they accused me of crimes, of expanding my practice beyond what I was allowed to do. And when they accused me of those crimes, unlike Ken Paxton, I took it to court. I showed up in court. I didn't duck it. And when that opportunity provided itself, I simply won. I fought for my right to advocate and protect Texans. And I did not need to be above the law. I continue to do this, that the Texas AG's office has its integrity audited and reviewed by an outside agency, including my own personal office.
Okay, Gromer, it's your turn to be muted and talk.
I know your image. I was just wanted to say Mr. Mayor's image is down.
Yeah, I think he might be trying to save his bandwidth.
Okay, great. Mr. Jaworski, same question.
Sure. Well, Gromer, those are words that ring very true to me because my grandfather said them in the United States Supreme Court in U.S. versus Nixon. No man is above the law, not even the president. What an appropriate mantra in running against Ken Paxton. So the question is, what about me? How can I assure voters that I've got what it takes? I think, look back to my time as mayor of Galveston. I won a 5-way race without a runoff. Oh, the victory lap was sweet, let me tell you. But this was right after Hurricane Ike. And when it came time to use housing and urban development dollars that we were given, everyone loved the new fire station and the new wastewater treatment plant and the money for private home rehabilitation. But when the mayor, Joe Jaworski, said, we have got to keep our word to housing and urban development and rebuild our public housing that had been so damaged it was destroyed. And it was time to rebuild. I said, we're going to do it. People didn't want me to. whether they were racists or just economically interested, and they didn't want competition with the mayor using federal dollars. So it was a very unpopular time, but I appointed a progressive board, and we could tell that I wasn't going to get reelected. So we made sure that we called a meeting before my runoff election expired, and we signed the notices to proceed. 3 years of federal litigation ensued, Gromer, but we beat them every step of the way in the federal court and the appeals court. Even though I was out of office, I was at the groundbreaking, and 2 years later, I was at the ribbon cutting. Now, Galveston is actually choosing to build a third neighborhood. So my plan shows that I lived the mantra that Sam Houston first told us: do right and risk the consequences.
All right, so both of you have cited reproductive rights as something you'd like to lead in, especially in the wake of Senate Bill 8. However, it is very likely that Roe v. Wade could be overturned in the next few months. So how would you do that? And we'll start with Joe and then go to Lee.
Sure. Well, until Roe v. Wade is overturned, Jessica, you're right. That's the law. I mean, Senate Bill 8 is on its face unconstitutional. Now, whether the Mississippi case that could be decided by June reveals that the Supreme Court is hostile to Roe v. Wade and attempts to just abandon 50 years of stare decisis, we'll see. But the Texas case is not going to be heard in this session of the Supreme Court. So clearly, the new Texas Attorney General is going to be on board when that case gets heard in 2023 and decided. So I would say to you, just know that I will reverse the pleadings because, again, as the people's attorney, that's my judgment call. I would never pursue a frivolous position like supporting the Heartbeat Act under Roe v. Wade. Now, should Roe v. Wade be undone and it kicks back to the states, all I can tell you is we can't rely on federal support anymore. But what we can do is look at the Texas Constitution and look at the United States Constitution again. I mean, Congress, obviously was repelled by the Shelby decision in 2013 when they found the Voting Rights Act after, 50 years unconstitutional. And now we're trying to fix that with congressional acts. So using your power as an advocate, using your power in the courts, using attorney general opinions, all of these things, including the Texas Constitution, would be a way that the Texas Attorney General can rescue and support reproductive rights.
Mr. Merritt?
I'm sorry, it says the host has stopped my video and that I can't restart it.
Okay, let's start it up. Yeah. Hold on one second. There we go. We're just trying to make it to where we can see. Go ahead.
Yeah, you gotta love technology. All right, thank you.
Not today.
It is so important that the Texas Attorney General's office takes a strong stance in support of the 14th Amendment, in support of respecting women as full and equal citizens, able to make their own personal and private decisions about their reproductive rights. And as Texas Attorney General, I would withdraw from the pleadings in support of SB 8. And as was pointed out earlier, if it happens to be that the United States Supreme Court decide to move forward with anti-Roe v. Wade law, it's equally important, just like in the voting rights battle, that we go to D.C. and we ask for the codifications for the protections of Roe v. Wade. Until then, Roe v. Wade is the law of the land, and Texas's heartbeat law is, in fact, a violation of the law. And it's absurd, the arguments that they're making before the Supreme Court, that because we've deferred the power of the Attorney General's office to anybody in the country, that it's not, in fact, the state of Texas who is violating women's rights. We must stop our war on women. We must show a real commitment to protecting women's rights in the state of Texas, and I commit to that as the next Texas Attorney General.
All right, just as a follow-up, if Roe v. Wade does survive the Supreme Court, how would you, as Attorney General, expand and support reproductive rights and access to abortion? And we'll start with you, Mr. Merritt.
Well, we have to end the wasteful and senseless fight against Obamacare. We need to expand access to health care for Texas women. If Republicans really claim to care about the unborn fetus, then why is infant mortality in the state of Texas on par with some third world countries? We have to show and why are Texas women still some of the most uninsured in the country? We need to end the senseless fight against providing health insurance options to poor and working class Texans. And that's how we protect the integrity of the womb. But in the meantime, the decision to protect, the difficult decision to continue or terminate a pregnancy must remain the jurisdiction of Texas women, and Greg Abbott and Ken Paxton must mind the business that pays.
Jessica, as Texas Attorney General, I will do everything in my power, both in the litigation function and the Attorney General opinion function, to expand Medicaid. I mean, obviously, this is a legislative call, as is the governor, but we have got to have statewide executives. Imagine a statewide office holder advocating for expanding Medicaid. That's where a lot of people under certain income limits receive their health care. And secondly, as Attorney General, I commit right now, as I've said in the Planned Parenthood questionnaire that I filled out about a month ago, I will stop the assault, at least from the Attorney General's office, on Planned Parenthood. It's a perfectly professional organization that provides health care to just, countless Texas women and men sometimes. And planning families is smart. And, I support that. As Texas Attorney General, we can actually have a leadership role simply by our words as well as our actions.
All right. This question is to both of you, and let's start with you, Mr. Jaworski. As you know, Republican attorney generals, including Greg Abbott and Ken Paxton, have been hostile to Democratic presidential administrations. In fact, Abbott once famously said, and I'm paraphrasing him here, I wake up in the morning thinking about how to sue President Barack Obama. As Texas's top lawyer, what would be your approach in dealing with the administration of Joe Biden, President Joe Biden, a fellow Democrat?
Sure. Well, I mean, I'd be a partner, first off. I voted for him. I support many of the Democratic Party's platform issues, maybe not all of them. I really couldn't say right now. I haven't, got a copy of it. But Gromer, I think the President of the United States and his administration should be a partner. We take their money, and we always have, as does Greg Abbott, as does Ken Paxton. So the hypocrisy right now in our state government is extreme. Our tax dollars, Gromer, you and I, Jessica, Lee, we all pay taxes. It's the law. We don't want to go to jail. And when opportunities for that money to come back south over the Red River are presented to us, our governor, our attorney general have this obsession, and I think they call it federal tyranny. So they want to be seen as being big stuff fighting the Democratic administration, but boy, do they want that money when it's time to write the check from Washington. Enough of the hypocrisy, all right? So, Gromer, honestly, I will be a partner to all good solutions. And that certainly includes immigration. Instead of fighting this culture war and demonizing these poor souls and looking for someone to victimize, why don't we just deal with the real villain, which is the Mexican cartels, and let's work together with the Department of Justice. The Attorney General, for example, can, put some of our very wealthy budget toward hiring special assistant U.S. attorneys on our dime and put them in the Southern and Western District of Texas, and let's fight the cartel. That's partnership with the federal government.
Mr. Merritt.
I have to emphasize that this is one of the things that distinguishes me in this race. I already have a working relationship with the White House, with the Attorney General's office, with senators from the Hill advocating on behalf of Texas families. In fact, I meet with the Attorney General's office and meet members of the White House Council tomorrow to discuss executive orders that the president can take in order to take on the issues that we were not able to get passed, or that the United States Congress were not able to get passed because of a filibustered Senate. And when speaking with the White House Council and advocating for specific provisions like ending qualified immunity in Texas, they said that there was only a certain limit that the president could achieve through executive order. And they said if only they had attorney generals throughout the states who would be willing to work with their office in order to follow their lead as they take on some of the provisions that the people of Texas so desperately need. And so in addition to fostering and continuing that relationship with the White House and with members of Congress, I will foster my relationship with people like Keith Ellison and Kwame Raoul in Illinois and Aaron Ford in Nevada and the Democratic Attorney Generals Associations, who I continue to build a relationship with, exchange ideas, and talk about how we can pursue interstate and intrastate litigation to protect Texas citizens, how we can partner with the United States Attorney General to see real progressive change throughout the states.
All right. In 2020, a judge in Waco refused to issue same-sex marriage licenses. Ken Paxton declined to reprimand that judge, going against his own commission. What would you do as Attorney General if that situation arises under your tenure? And we'll start with Lee and then go to Joe.
I would support the LGBTQAI community. I would respect and honor same-sex marriages and the protections that they should include, in addition to attempting to deny these relationships about love, about citizenship, about equal rights. We've seen a protect against workers' rights, and I think it's important that we discuss this in front of the AFL-CIO in this forum, denying same-sex couples access to the benefits that straight couples receive, saying that there is no requirement under the law for our government or Texas governments to respect those relationships and offer those protections. I would completely reverse that behavior and use the Texas Attorney General's office as an ally to our gay rights community and an ally to the constitutional protections afforded all citizens under the Constitution.
Jessica, as you know, Obergefell versus Hodges is a landmark civil rights decision guaranteeing the fundamental right of marriage to same-sex couples. To the extent any ministerial clerk or a judge refuses to honor this landmark decision, then the people's attorney, the Texas Attorney General, will either sue or take some other official action to make sure that these individuals' rights are protected. You know, Lee and I think would agree on this. It's shocking that the Texas Attorney General doesn't have a civil rights division in his office. And, you know, it'd be one thing if we cooperated with the Department of Justice on many things. But as you know, Texas is hostile to Washington, D.C. any chance it gets because it sells to the base. The Texas Attorney General's office will have a civil rights division under General Jaworski, and any clerks or judges who don't follow the law will be cited, sued, and brought to justice.
Hey, we've touched on this, but let's get specific. If elected Attorney General, what would you do to protect the civil rights of Texans with disabilities? Mr. Jaworski.
And I think the Civil Rights Division that I just described would be where those complaints would go. The Americans with Disability Act and many laws in Texas and, you know, the 28 USC code, whatever code it may be, the American, United States, and Texas laws protect our disabled brothers and sisters. That is the law of the land. So the Civil Rights Division under General Jaworski would be where you would take those complaints and where capable attorneys would file suit and issue civil investigative demands to private employers or local governments should they not be doing their job under these laws. Disabled Texans have rights, and in the General Joe Jaworski office, they will be protected.
Mr. Merritt.
I echo those sentiments. We have to protect the rights of the disabled community using the laws that currently exist. But I have to emphasize again that this is not a theory for me. I'm not sitting around saying, hey, when I'm Attorney General, I will be able to do this. This year, the nation's largest disabilities rights group, the Disabilities Rights Association, offered me the National Champion of Inclusion Award because in pursuit of my federal litigation on behalf of Texas litigants, on behalf of Texas families, I have made it a point to rely heavily on the Americans with Disabilities Act, enforcing those provisions that are often ignored by the governor and Texas lawmakers. It's critically important that we include Texans with disabilities in the conversation about civil rights, about social rights, and that inclusion has been a hallmark of my practice as a national civil rights attorney, and it will be a hallmark of my tenure as Texas Attorney General.